Hello. In this breakdown, we're going to look at some interesting things that we can do to help bake some interesting information into our model data for ways in which we might want to use that in our game engine. So in this particular one, I've taken and broken down Sven model to just a headpiece because this is a really good example of a kind of concave, convex shape that we can use to render out to get some kind of interesting information out of. So if we look at this, we can see that I've just got it flat shaded for the moment. Oh, well, not flat shaded, but if we hit up into realistic mode, you can see that what 3ds Max has done is it's done some hardware ray tracing to, or yeah, I think that's being ray traced, hardware ray tracing to bring in the ambient occlusion detailing in there. Now, what we can do, which is actually quite interesting, is if we come into here and we go to our standard light rig and we bring in a skylight, you can see we're now getting omnipresent lighting from all angles, which means that now we can just see those ambient light details. So this is ambient occlusion wherever the two components are close together. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take some of this information and we're going to bake it into the model. So the first thing I want to do is stick a Vertex paint modifier on Sven's head here. And you can see here in our Vertex paint setup that he's currently set to being white. And you can still see if we drop it back down to shaded, you can see that we're just plain white, and we'll set it back to basic texture. So if we jump up to our render setup, now what we want to do is we want to pull out, usually I'll just jump into a preset for this, but really what you want to do is you want to bring up our scanline renderer, not the mental ray renderer. This is because we want to use some of the scanline advanced lighting options that are available. So if you jump into your advanced lighting tab, you'll see we have some parameters that allows us to do radiosity processing. And so what this is going to do is it's going to basically pre-bake a lot of the lighting information into a vertex format, so that we can then pass that vertex format into the actual vertexes. So if you go to under rendering parameters, you can see that it says render direct illumination. Well, actually what we want to do is we want to reuse the direct illumination information from the radiosity solution that we're about to compute. So when we go back up here, you can see our information like what's the quality. I find 80 or 90 to be fine. How many iterations it's going to go through. It will get in higher quality the more you do that. And you'll see this, that it says display radiosity in viewpoint. So if we go into here and we press start, you'll see that we're now processing the radiosity and it's reconstructing the scene. And what you can see here is that it has updated view based on the display of that radiosity solution. So what we're seeing here is the radiosity. So if I move, you can see these different effects. So what we want to do is we want to jump into our Vertex paint. Oh, all right, now, heads up, because the way in which it's displaying the radiosity in the engine, it may look or appear for a moment as though your model is disappearing, but in reality it's not. It's just kind of updating the system to tell it what the new information is. So if you throw on like a Vertex paint modifier, it will bring it right back. So if we go into Vertex paint, now if you see here underneath assign vertex colors, it's kind of a underused little column, and if we jump into here, you can see that we can do some color assignment. We can assign lighting and diffuse solutions. And here what we want to do is, you'll see under here, we want to reuse the direct illumination from the solution. That's the solution that we have calculated. So if we continue to reset, if we calculate that solution, you'll see it presented here. And now what we want to do is we want to make sure that that is applied to our model by the vertex. So if we click assign, you'll see it's rendered onto the Sven head. Although in this particular context it's decided to disappear, but I'm sure we will be able to bring Sven back in just a moment. Oopsie daisies. There we go. Alright, Sven is... There we go. So if we just deselect that, we will not display it in viewport because that's going to become too annoying. Alright, so you can see here that while it still appears to be mostly... There we go. So now when you take a look at it, you can see that it is no longer simply plain white. It actually has baked into our vertex color our ambient occlusion. So we can actually bake our ambient occlusion. And also, if you go down to our color adjustment slider, we can bring in our colors so you can get more definition. Now, obviously, your accuracy of this solution is really only going to be equal to or up to what your meshing parameters are. So you can see here where there's smaller meshes, you get more detail, and where there's larger meshes. But by and large, you can see that we have managed to turn our ambient occlusion into actual ambient occlusion through the vertex color. And this can be really useful for just being able to add extra information for things like terrain or anywhere where you really don't want to have to sit around with an extra set of maps and textures to be able to carry some of that information in, and it can really help bring out some definition in your scene. Now, another fun little trick, so let's set this back to being a plain colored vertex paint here. So if we jump back to turning this back into a plain colored white head, there we go. So now here's a fun little trick. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this same head, and now we are going to take our normals and flip them. So now we have a terrifying inside out head. Now, if you flip your normals and you find that you haven't seen this, obviously just double check to make sure that your back faces are being culled. That way it will show you which way around your normals are. So now that we've inverted our normals, so all of our faces are facing inwards towards the center of the head, we can actually perform the same function that we just did. So we're going to go back into render setup. Let's bring up a quick vertex paint. I like to have that on the side. So let's bring up our advanced lighting, reset our old solution, and let's calculate a new one. So we have a new lighting solution. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into here. Remember, with your color assignment, you want to color it by vertex rather than face, because that will give you a smaller delineation of color gradient, basically. So, and not only that, but it will be a much clearer kind of representation of how you're going to be able to bring that color back into your editing program. So again, if we come through and we press assign, now what we've just done is we have assigned the opposite of an kind of the inverse of an ambient occlusion render, which some of you will, for those of you playing the home game, will notice is actually a volume render, or often used for subsurface scattering. So in this one, if we flip our normals back around, often called a thickness map, you can see that what we're actually seeing, unlike our normal map, so let's jump into our vertex paint and just let's show all of our editor stack. So if we go back into our color adjustments, we can adjust it so that we can see much more clearly what we're looking at. So what we have here is a representation of the thickness of different sections of model. So you can see that his chin and his neck are much lighter in color, as are the tips of the ears, as are the little inner sections of the eyelid, as well as the lips. What this is showing us is which areas of our model are thinner than others. And often when we use this for light penetration, where if there is a light on the other side of our model, we will allow light to pass through sections like the ears more clearly than we do the rest of the body. And that way you end up with a occlusion map. But now that this information is baked into the vertex data, we can use it for a whole bunch of other factors. And then actually I have quite recently used this as a way of allowing small models to move and sway and bend. And what I did is I took our static models through this procedure and did it in such a way that it allows any area that was small or thin to have a little bit of movement and a little bit of sway to it. So you can really see how you could quickly use this for a tree or any kind of organic matter which is would be quite complicated to animate, but you want to try and pick out some specific details. What this can do is it can pick out areas that are thin or that might be bendy and allow you to manipulate them based on that. So that's how we can bake some really interesting information into our model. Now, I won't show you it here, but you can obviously extend this technique a little bit by actually including some other colored lights within your scene. So that can also help you be able to establish information like what's facing towards certain objects. by calculating these lighting solutions and then making sure that you bake them into your Vertex data. So hopefully you'll be able to find some interesting uses for these kinds of techniques and bring them into your projects so that you can make use of that Vertex data channel.